Thank you, Pavilion, for having me and all of you people out there. So I chose this topic. They kind of left it open for me to choose something that might be of interest to you because anxiety is the number one issue that I hear about in my therapy practice. And indeed, the statistics report that it's the number one mental health issue in the States. 31% of people will experience an anxiety disorder in their lifetime. So don't feel like you're the only one that may have a lot of anxiety because you're in good company, and anything we know about statistics is that that's the least amount of something. So it makes sense for you to get a lot of skills available to you and techniques and tips on how to handle anxiety as it occurs. The first thing, though, is rather than just assume that it's in your head, be sure that you have checked out physically that you are okay. Like if, some people, they'll find out they have chest pain and they'll go to the doctor and the doctor will say, well, actually, it's anxiety. We don't want it to be the other way around, though. We don't want someone to come to therapy and say, I think it's my head. I think it's just stress. I'm having chest pain because we're just going to send the doctor to make sure first that it's not a physical issue. So be sure to check with your doctor first before we make any other assumptions. And if it does end up being anxiety, then we want to look at what's the extent of the issue. Um, there is something that's in public domain called a Hamilton Rating Scale for Anxiety, and I've included it here. And so that when you do get the handout, we're not going to go through all the questions that are on it, but when you do get the handout, these are the instructions for it, and it's a pretty quick thing to see whether or not you would be considered to have a mild, moderate, or severe case of anxiety. This is kind of what it looks like. Again, we're not going to go through the whole thing, but it's on what's called the Likert scale from 0 to 4. And then you add up how many of the answers you have that are, from 0, not at all, to 4, really a problem. And then you'll come up with just how much anxiety is a problem for you. And again, that'll be available to you when you have the handout too. So we'll look at the physiology of panic in particular, because that's certainly at the root of the anxiety piece. But panic's an alarm reaction, and it's natural. It occurs in the body. We've had them back to the caveman days. If we didn't, we might not survive. So we typically look at this as the fight, flight, or freeze response, and we all can kind of remember times when we've like frozen, or we've run, or we fought. And again, it's a natural response, but somewhere along the line, when anxiety is a really big problem, then the response has gotten out of control. So we want to learn ways to damp that down so that we can be functional. So here's like a little slide on fight, flight, or freeze. In order to protect ourselves from danger, our body uses increased energy to respond to danger in those 3 ways. If we look at back in the caveman days, it's kind of interesting. When we get really scared, blood rushes to the center of our body to protect our internal organs, and it leaves our hands and our feet, our external extremities, cold. And when we think about the old caveman days, that served a bigger purpose than what we use today. You're able to grab onto handholds to be able to pull yourself up and get away from that saber-toothed tiger because your hands are not warm and sweaty. And it comes from a long time ago. Like I said, the caveman days. We've got lots of interesting leftovers that we don't know why we still have in our body, but they go back to that. So our nervous system has 2 separate actions, voluntary and involuntary. The voluntary one obeys your direct commands, but the involuntary ones, digestion and breathing, those just happen without us having to really think of it. There's a sympathetic and the parasympathetic nervous systems, and that mobilizes reactions in your body when you're excited. The parasympathetic nervous does the opposite system. It maintains that smooth functioning that we have. In a panic attack, the sympathetic nervous sets off all kinds of bodily reactions and tense. And the adrenal glands just release, they dump adrenaline into our system. And that causes a jolt to our system, like a sudden feeling of dread or terror. And one thing that's kind of interesting too is if I were to ask you to remember as far back as you could remember what your very first memory in life was, more than likely be something scary or something really pleasurable, because those things cause adrenaline to be released in the body, and adrenaline anchors memory. And so it may not be absolutely accurate, but you'll remember like it was yesterday if you were in a car accident or something that really scared you badly. A lot of times we remember that. And so and it's because of adrenaline just pumps it out. With adrenaline reactions, there's sweating, trembling, shaking. The blood rushes to protect your internal organs, and that causes that freeze response we're talking about. Then all these reactions occur to a lesser degrees when we're emotional or excited. With panic, they peak to that extreme level to where we're overwhelmed and terrified. And it's important to note adrenaline can be reabsorbed by the liver and the kidneys in just a matter of minutes if you can just ride it out. So as we talk about ways you can try to handle your own anxiety, we'll talk about breathing techniques, calming self-talk. Those are the kind of things that if you write it out, you can get to be able to do. So some important facts to know. Panic attacks don't cause heart failure or cardiac arrest. A healthy heart, can withstand a lot. It'll eventually calm down. And with a true heart attack, you're going to have continuous pain and pressure, and there's usually kind of a disease part that has to do with it. So just attacks in general aren't going to kill you. Panic attacks don't cause you to stop breathing or suffocate. The tightening sensation will pass, and the brain has this built-in mechanism that'll force you to breathe if you're not getting enough oxygen. It's really funny when you think about someone who threatens to hold their breath, and you're like, "Oh my God, I'm so scared! You're going to hold your breath." And okay, hold your breath, but as soon as if you do pass out, you will breathe. So the body won't let you hold your breath till you die. Panic attacks don't cause you to faint. They can cause lightheadedness, but the heart's pumping harder and increasing circulation, which makes it more unlikely that you're actually going to faint. Now, fainting does come as a result of blood pressure dropping, but that usually is not what happens in a panic attack. So the first step in coping when you have these reactions is to recognize that they're not actually dangerous. They're not going to kill you. They're not going to make you pass out, those kinds of things. So there's some stressors when we start looking at what causes us, what precipitates us having a panic attack, so we recognize what some of those are and kind of can plan for it. Um, a lot of them are significant personal losses: death, divorce, separation, loss of job, illness, major financial problems. Those are big things. And then your big life changes, even good thing. Getting married is supposedly a great thing. Having a baby is a great thing, but it also causes lots of stress and all the things that go along with it. Going into the military, getting a new job, all of those. Stimulants and recreational drugs, excessive caffeine intake, cocaine, amphetamines, all this list can also cause you to be predisposed to, having the adrenaline function and cause a panic attack. If you identify these stressors, you can work on coping mechanisms, which is part of what we're going to talk about today, specifically for the issues that you can anticipate are going to cause you stress. And then the panic attacks may lessen in frequency or even cease on their own. We'll also talk about demystifying, why you might have a panic attack when you don't recognize when you're having it. So we'll talk about that too. But certainly therapy can be helpful with these things. We have talk therapy, cognitive behavioral therapy, where we think in rational, we examine the event and our perception to the event and our reaction to the event. Was there consequence to the event? And then can we, interrupt that, what we call stinking thinking, and regroup on that. So those are some of the common reasons people go into therapy. So if you have a history of panic attacks, and lots of people do, one of the things I have people do is complete a panic attack record. And so I'll show you what one of those looks like. But a record for each attack so that we can get a picture of what is really going on and gain some insight into what's happening with that person and see whether or not, if they don't know what the trigger is, then maybe what is the trigger. This is an example of what a panic attack record would look like. Where did it happen? When did it happen? How intense was it? How long did it last? And then some kind of detective questions. Who were you with? What was going to be happening? Were you facing a challenge? Were you tired or rested? Um, there's a lot to be said for that acronym HALT, HALT: hungry, angry, lonely, tired. Those things cause stress on the body and can cause you to end up going into a panic attack if you have a history of panic attacks. So this is a good list of questions. Another one is, were you asleep before you panicked? We want to get a really an idea if there's some commonalities in the times that you're panicking. So when we talk about, sometimes I'll get people to say it comes out of nowhere, don't know why it happened, it just, there was nothing that happened before it. So we really want to do some detective work around there. So if you have triggers that aren't easily explained, do some detective work. And that panic, that record of panic attacks will really help with kind of looking at all the pieces of paper you have in front of you when you have panic attacks and saying, wow, there's some commonalities. Every time, or 6 out of 8 times in the last week, I was getting ready to go to work. Like, okay, then we start looking at what are the things at work that would cause that for you. There's also triggers and dissociation, when you kind of go away and not are grounded in your body. So sometimes if people dissociate from something, it makes them fearful. And even discovering why a trigger is a trigger doesn't necessarily mean it won't be powerful. Although a lot of times it will. I had a guy one time that he said that for out of nowhere, he threw a cinder block through the windshield of a Mustang, and then he ran away. So that's crazy. I don't know why I did that. Well, in talking through all of this, he remembered that when he was 8 years old, he was in Sears with his parents, his grandparents, and they said, you can pick out anything in Sears for a Christmas present. So he was super excited and he ran all over Sears. He got away from his grandparents, and these two strangers took him out in the parking lot. They asked him if he was lost. He said yes. They took him out in the parking lot of the mall and they raped him in a car. And then when someone realized what was going on, they took off with the kid in the car and threw him out of the window and broke his collarbone and his leg, and they never caught the individuals that did that to him. What he remembered was that the car that he was in was a very unusual color. It was a custom color of some sort. And it's actually an aqua color, which is more common now, but this was 20 years ago, and that was a real custom color. And that was the trigger for him to, he all of a sudden he saw that color and he threw that cinder block through the windshield of a car. Um, so sometimes, and then it's kind of like, okay, I know what the trigger is. The color is the trigger. We can desensitize someone to a color, but unless we know what the trigger is, we really need to try to determine that so that we can work on desensitizing or demystifying. So when we want to stay present with the feelings that come up, we have something we call anchoring and grounding techniques. And that's where we use as many of the five senses as possible to kind of ground us in our body. That would mean, like I had someone years ago, I had a girl who came in and she wanted to watch Oprah, and Oprah came on, I think, at 3 o'clock. And every time she wanted to watch Oprah, she would dissociate. She would kind of go away. She wasn't doing anything crazy. She was doing dishes and odds and ends, but wasn't really grounded in her body. And then she would come back and like, why didn't I watch Oprah? And every time she tried to watch Oprah, she couldn't. And so we kept a log of what was going on with the times that she would dissociate. And it turned out she was dissociating on Monday through Friday from 3 until 5 p.m. And she said that she did, when she was a kid, that she had been taken care of by her grandfather, and he would molest her from time to time. And so it kind of fit with Monday through Friday from 3 to 5 is the time that she was at risk of being abused. And so she had this trigger that she never turned off, even though she's 40 years old, that she just kind of goes away and doesn't do crazy things, but she's not fully present. And so when we demystify the trigger, we had to help her stay in her body at the 3 o'clock time so that she would not just kind of float away. And so I had her make popcorn. You can smell the popcorn and you put a piece in your mouth and you can taste it. So that's two senses. I had her get a glass of tea with ice in it, and have her put her hand around it, and she could feel the cold in her hand. So that's another sense that we can feel. I had her say some self-empowering statements like, I'm a powerful woman. This is 2023. I'm in my apartment. I've got 5 locks on my door. My grandfather is dead. I'm perfectly safe. I can stay here and watch a television show. And it was really interesting. She said she felt like there was a vacuum cleaner trying to suck her away. And she just said these empowering statements over and over again until she finally was able to stay and watch Oprah. Amazing. And I wanted to, write Oprah about it, but confidentiality, I could have probably won a car over that one, but it just kind of emphasizes that the more things you do with all of your senses to ground yourself and make yourself safe, the more you'll be able to be more in control of your anxiety. So this is kind of a list of some of the anchoring and grounding ways you can anchor and ground yourself. Again, a glass of water or something cold. You can take a piece of ice and put it in your hand. Popcorn, it smells. You can like scented candles. You can eat those Altoids when you put one in your mouth, they like explode. Those would be pulling in the sense. You can play some music, engage your sense of hearing, those kinds of things. You might also want to take a look at a picture or some item that's calming or gives you a sense of safety. I have a picture of a little pin there on the bottom right of the screen, and sometimes I'll have people that will dissociate, and I'll tell them, if you have something that you wear all the time, like I have a ring that I wear, and I can press my finger on it, but I am grounding myself to my body by the little bit of pain that I'm causing that. I have those pins, the domestic violin pins, or you can use any kind of, all kinds of things that have that ribbon on them that get given away, and you can wear it. And if you don't have anything else that you're always wearing, and then you can press those edges and just cause a little bit of discomfort, and that grounds you to your body as well. There's an excellent book out there called the Anxiety and Phobia Workbook, and it's just full of all kinds of stuff. It's you can actually go on eBay or something called Thrift Books and get it for like $4. It'll cost you about $4 to have it mailed to you, but otherwise you're going to pay $20 for it, and you don't need to. It's probably in its eighth edition, and they add a chapter or two each time. But you can get an older edition, and it's just fabulous, and it gives you, word for word exercises that you can read and suggestions you can make. It has a desensitization exercise where from the tip of your head all the way down to your toes, you say, relax this, relax this, relax this. You can record yourself doing that, and you read it from this anxiety and phobia workbook. So it's an excellent resource if you wanted to have something yourself to be able to keep. Here's some ideas on how to handle a panic attack, a 5-step process called AWARE. Step 1, acknowledge and accept, resign yourself. You're having a panic attack. It's okay to be afraid. Notice what the signs and symptoms. Try not to resist it so much. Kind of resistance is futile because that just makes it worse. And remind yourself it's not going to kill you, as we talked about. Step 2, watch and wait. Rather than distract yourself and try to get out of it, stay in the situation a little more each time. Desensitize yourself each time you can to try to get through it, kind of wait it out. The third one is make yourself more comfortable. It's your job's not to end the panic attack. It will ride out, but your role is make yourself as comfortable as you can through it, if possible, and that might entail the breathing exercises or positive self-talk we talked about. Step 4, repeat. If you notice another wave of panic, that's kind of normal. And step 5, end. Remind yourself that all panic attacks do end, regardless of what your response is. You just try again to make it yourself as comfortable as possible to get through it. And sometimes just recognizing those things. Like I said, when we talk about breathing exercises and other things you can do that help you kind of get through it. Then we've got some breathing or relaxation exercises. One of the things is the first thing that happens when we get really, really scared is we just tend to hold our breath. It's like, but as soon as we do that, carbon dioxide builds up in our brain, and that causes us to be even more panicky. So we want to intentionally breathe so that we can remedy that situation and get rid of some of that carbon dioxide that's built up in our brain. So what we want to do is we want to breathe out more than we breathe in so that we can get some of that carbon dioxide out of our brain. And so, what I tell people to do, and you can do any numbers you want to, but the main goal is breathe out more than you breathe in. Breathe in slowly for 2 seconds, maybe hold it for 3 seconds, but breathe out for 5 seconds. You're breathing in for two and you're breathing out for five, and it's going to have the effect of deflating an overinflated tire, and you will come down. You do that a few times, 2 to 3 times, and you will absolutely be better off than if you just continue to hold your breath and just try to suffer through it. And so I'll tell people, 2 plus 3 equals 5, and I'll write it on the back of an appointment card so they'll remember it and they go, oh, that's right. Yeah, then I could do that. There's also belly breathing, which is a little bit harder to do. You practice, and you can get to where you can practice it several times a day. And you place your hand so it straddles your belt line, the other one on your chest, right over your breastbone. And then your hands are like a biofeedback device. It tells you what part of your body you're using to actually breathe. You can feel that. And then you open your mouth and sigh. Let your shoulders and the muscles of your upper body relax downward with your exhale. And don't completely empty your lungs, just kind of relax the muscles of your upper body and then pause. Close your mouth, inhale slowly through your nose, push your stomach out. And when you've inhaled as much air as you can comfortably, then stop. Pause. And again, the intent is to breathe more slowly than you're used to. Open your mouth, exhale by pulling your stomach in. And that's kind of called belly breathing. And so, again, you can use the other one, is easy to remember. This one might be when you're able to be more mindful. The progressive muscle relaxation, you go from the top of your head to the tip of your toes. Every word of that is in the anxiety and phobia workbook, but it's kind of, but you can kind of get the gist of it. It's kind of like, okay, I'm going to relax my forehead. I'm going to relax my jaw. I'm going to relax my, shoulders. I'm going to relax my chest. And you just kind of go down to where each thing you recognize has been kind of tense and you're letting it be loosened. Okay. There's something like self-hypnosis. This is something you could try. You might find it relaxing. It only takes about 5 minutes where you either sit or lie down comfortably, elevate your head if you're lying down, sigh gently, relax the shoulders and the upper body, belly breathe for a few moments. And then as you're relaxing, kind of focus on a cue word and repeating it silently. And slowly on each exhale, pick a safe word or a good word that you want. And after about 10 repetitions, tell yourself, I'm going to relax. And then continue the belly breathing, counting down from 20 to 15. When you get down to 15, make a positive suggestion. I'm going to let myself float through these panicky feelings. And then resume counting down from 14 to 10. And then you look to your left and your right, and you go back and you repeat the entire sequence. You go through that 3 times. And then you make this final suggestion to yourself. Now I'm coming back to the present, returning with an alert, focused mind in a more comfortable state. I'm looking forward to the rest of the day and what I'm going to be doing. And it's a form of self hypnosis that's not the same thing as having someone hypnotize you and worrying about losing control per se. We also have the positive self-talk when I mentioned about the woman who, wanted to watch Oprah. She was, we had to talk about what kind of things can you say to yourself that will make you feel better, but they have to be believable too. And with her, it was, I'm an adult, I'm a powerful woman, my grandfather is dead, no one can hurt me, I've got locks on my door, I'm safe, those were true things. So creating a list of positive statements that are true. So these are some examples. Or I can handle these situations. This is the worst thing that can happen. This feeling isn't comfortable or pleasant. I can accept it. I can be anxious and still deal with this. I can do this. I'm in control. Those kinds of things. So then we have what we call cognitive behavioral therapy, and you're used to, thinking about, stinking thinking and how to correct that. And cognitive behavioral therapy is basically something where we correct those cognitive distortions. We reframe situations that we may be misinterpreting or overreacting to. And the basic assumption is if you can change what we're thinking, we can change how we feel about something. Sometimes we make an assumption about something, we get additional information or look at it differently, and then we feel differently based on that. The example I usually give people with that is I don't think I have it in my handout, is say you're walking along and you've got a whole bunch of books in your arms and you're trying to, and it's raining and you don't want the books to get wet. So you're really protecting them. And then all of a sudden somebody comes out of the blue and they jostle your arm, they hit you and they jostle the arm and you drop the books into big puddles and the books are getting ruined. And the person isn't even offering to help you pick them up. They're not saying they're sorry. They're not saying anything. Most people would say, if you ask how you think they felt, they would say they were angry. And they turn around and they look at the person to give them a piece of their mind, and they see the person has black glasses on, they have a white cane, and they're sitting in the middle of a puddle crying, and you realize they're blind, and they certainly didn't mean to hit you and jostle your arm and cause you to mess up your books. And the and now everyone universally will say they feel sorry for the person. They're no longer angry. The only thing that's different, and this is what we call the camera check, is the same event happened. Nothing different happened about the event. And they jostled your arm, they didn't offer to help, pick up the books, they didn't say they were sorry. All of that still happened. And the only thing that changed is how you perceived it, what you thought about it, and it changed how you felt. We can do that with other things. So we want to identify those negative thought patterns we have because they're only hurting us anyway, and help people kind of reframe. If you can reframe those anxiety related symptoms into functional terms, you'd feel better about yourself. And the cognitive skills are used in combination with behavioral skills like exposure, that I can get through this. And you can prove you can get through this by a little, each time you stand it for just a little more and a little more before perhaps you run. You know, the goal is examine the evidence, remind yourself about challenging situations, correct distorted thinkings when you can, reframe wherever you can. So identifying automatic negative thoughts, um, overestimating the likelihood of a negative event happening, predicting dangerous things are going to happen. Um, and these are just examples of those. Catastrophizing, this is the worst thing, it's going to happen, I know it's going to happen, or I'm going to lose, I'll go crazy, I'm going to lose control, um, I won't be able to stand it. Then there's positive beliefs about worry. We might think if I don't worry about this, it might actually happen. So, I mean, I have people that will take medication and then they'll say, well, I'm not worried about it as much, but I'm worried that I'm not worried about it. So then, and negative thoughts about ourselves and the world. And certainly we're hearing more and more of that because of the way things are going, and shortages and, shootings and things like that. The world can be a dangerous place. So it makes sense that there are some thoughts that will occur to you, but if we dwell on them too much, then it's going to take over and we're going to be a very anxious person. We also have cognitive distortions to all thinking. It's one or the other, it's always or never. And whenever you use the term always or never, it's almost always not that way or never. So typically things are kind of like in a gray zone in the middle. And again, catastrophizing, we react to disappointment or feel like it's the end of the world. There's nothing else that's going to ever, be good again. Jumping to conclusions without knowing checking out the really evidence. We assume someone doesn't like us, or we assume that, oh, I made a mistake, so I'm going to lose my job. And, those things are probably not really so likely, kind of challenging those. Ignoring the positive, not really paying attention to positive experiences, like they don't count. Saying it's something's my fault. We take blame or responsibility for things out of our control or not, or aren't our job. A lot of us do that too. Shoulds, a lot of us should on ourselves. So we want to, kind of anytime we're using the word should, we're shaming ourselves in some way, shape, or form. So, trying to get out of that mindset. We ignore the reasons we might have done what we did or think we had knowledge we couldn't have had, and then say, well, it was my fault then. It kind of goes together. The other examples are magnifying or minimizing our shortcomings or minimizing our strengths. I like how Reed said, you're worth it. You asked for what you did. I mean, that's the kind of language that you want to use. Labels, instead of focusing on people's behaviors, we can say they're an idiot or a jerk. Perfectionism, believing that mistakes are bad to be avoided, but we are human and we all make mistakes. Um, and not to judge everyone for the fact that they made a mistake. Um, Reasoning from our emotions, we believe that because we feel a certain way, that indicates the truth about a situation, and we might act accordingly, even if it hurts us in the long run. So just kind of, again, we want to look at things in a more rational sense. And again, that kind of comes from the cognitive behavioral piece, examining your thinking, even getting others to kind of weigh in and help you determine whether or not you had an overreaction. There's something called the thought cascade. The first step of cognitive restructuring is and restructuring is to make it different, is to identify negative automatic thoughts, like we just talked about, all those different, ways that we do that, and to kind of check and say, I do that, I do that, I do that. And the more we notice the patterns, the more we're able to say, let me say, okay, this is how I think, that I can't do this, and let me kind of reframe that is as it's difficult, but I can do parts of it. Be realistic about what, rather than just a flat, I can't do something. Write down the thought in the form of a statement and then question, what would be so bad about that? I mean, is it the worst thing ever? Then look at positive distortions in that the main goal is learn how likely is it that really something bad is going to happen, and then cope when bad things do happen, whether or not a thought is actually distorted. And it can be helpful to think back, has anything like this happened to me before with someone I know? And how was that handled? And if they have had something similar happen, I mean, a lot of us have had multiple losses. And at the time when the loss happens, it's the worst thing ever, and you're not sure you can get through it. But for those of you that have had multiple losses, which is a lot of you did get through it before. And so it's a good predictor that you will get through it again because you did have those coping mechanisms or those relationships you have, and you've built relationships even more in recovery to have people that you can reach out to help you through those things. Then this is kind of an example of what that would look like if you were going to examine those the thought systems. She didn't say much of a hello. She must hate me. So you jump to a conclusion, and the rational response might be, it's possible he was thinking about something else, and it's not about me. The fact is, he did ask me to lunch last week, so So you can kind of go through that, especially in the midst of when you've calmed down from jumping to conclusions or kind of panicking. Something when we're talking about panic and anxiety that we often want to do is systematic desensitization, exposing yourself in small chunks of what it is, if it makes sense to do that, like a bridge. If you have to go over a bridge, there's lots of ways you could do it. This is kind of an example of the protocol of desensitization. You know, with somebody in the car with you, approach a short bridge, but look at it, but you don't have to go, but you don't have to do any more than that. Then next time while you're driving, you approach the bridge, but you still don't go over it. Then with somebody else driving, you drive over the short bridge, and then you drive over the short bridge. And then with your partner following another car, drive across the same bridge and return. So, you do little bits of it to where you can do it. And it may take longer and longer to be able to do that, but just little bits of systematic desensitization. If someone has a phobia about a snake, I'm not really going to worry about, do I need to get a snake and expose myself to it so that I will be more comfortable with snakes, but, or rats even, you know. But if it makes sense to, I'm afraid of flowers. Okay, let's take some flowers and do some, some work around that. Stepping out, this is just a really quick, easy exercise to do. You draw an imaginary or real circle around your feet, and you're full of anxiety, and it's all built up. And then you purposely step up and away from it, very exaggerated, and imagine that all of those fears and anxieties were stuck all the way to the floor, and you stepped away from them, and they've left you. And it works for some people. So there's another thing, and this is the thing I promised in a little promo I did for Pavillon, that if you know about this, you will be considered to be brilliant, and others will thank you for it. So I'm going to tell you about this little nugget. You know how We all have this reflex where if you hit your knee and it kicks up, it's a reflex and there's no thought involved. It just happens without you having to judge it. There's another reflex that all human beings have, all mammals have, and that is called the mammalian diving reflex. When you dive into cold water, 40 degrees or less, when the water hits the sensors right around the bridge of your nose, there is something there that triggers this reflex that resets your heart rate and your breathing to normal instantly. And so, even though you might get activated again in a little bit, it's a breather. If you're having a panic attack and you're able to take a couple of pieces of ice and put them over your nose, immediately you're going to be able to breathe and, and get, your heart will calm down and your breathing will calm down instantly, and you can get a handle on yourself better. It's a reflex. Again, you don't have to think about it. It absolutely works. And that's why one runs into the bathroom and they throw cold water in their face and they calm down. It's because they accidentally spot over the nose. You don't have to douse yourself. You can actually take a couple of little pieces of ice. You're in a restaurant. You start breathing and start thinking, "Oh my God, I'm having a panic attack." Take a couple of pieces of ice up your ice water and just put them right over the bridge of your nose, and voila, you've induced the mammalian diving reflex, and you're able to recover or help yourself recover. So you can do that. You can take, I have those little bottles of water, like in the right hand bottom of the screen. I get those, I freeze them, and I give them to people. And I say, take one of these with you if you are prone to panic attacks. And you'll have it all day. You'll have cold water all day as it, defrosts. But if you have starting to have a panic attack, you'll have the cold water. You'll have it with you, and you can hold it up to one side of your nose and then another to induce the mammalian diving reflex. There's the picture in the middle shows somebody putting their face into a cold water basin with ice in it. On the left side of the screen is an example of these cooling gel masks. They're meant for people with puffy eyes, and they're in the makeups and health section of the Dollar Tree, which is $1.25 now. They have them pink, blue, and green, and you can buy them, put them in your refrigerator, have them if you're at home when you have a panic attack, and go get it and put it over your face, and it lands right there where you are hitting those sensors that will induce the mammalian diving reflex. So remember that one. Even if you don't remember the words mammalian diving reflex, just tell them about put something cold right over where your glasses would normally land, and that it will help with your breathing and your heart rate. There are also things called interoceptive exposure. We do this a lot in therapy, but it's actually designed where you can do it yourself as well. And this is a cognitive behavioral technique where we desensitize people. But what we do is we look at what kinds of triggers do people have, and then we induce those triggers in session, and then at the same time as we're inducing them in session, we're going through the breathing exercises, maybe inducing the mammalian diving reflex. We're doing the positive self statements, things like that. And so this is kind of an example. There's 2 pages of these, like, if you hyperventilate, then breathe through a straw to induce this. And so what you're doing is you're practicing while it's within your control, kind of creating a sense of panic. And at the same time, you're ready to say, okay, I'm going to do my breathing exercises. I'm going to do my positive self statements. I'm going to, maybe have something cold on my nose. I'm going to use a different type of breathing exercise. I'm going to, and we have a couple other exercises we're going to do as well. But, and they'll say, do it for like a minute, spinning and shaking. If someone has a panic attack because they get kind of vertigo, you take, I'm sitting in a chair right now that's got the wheels on the bottom, and you can spin around and around, and you make yourself a little bit dizzy. And then say you have a little piece of paper there with all the things that you've decided that will help you with a panic attack, and you do those. And then a few minutes later, you do it again. If you do it enough times, you're creating what's called a new neural pathway in your brain where you have the panic attack coming on. You have, this is what I do every time I have a panic attack that works. And then I there's longer and longer periods of time where I can get through it, and I actually don't need to have that panic attack, and it doesn't happen anymore. So these are just some examples of, you can put your head between your legs and sit up quickly. It causes a sense of dissociation. That might cause a kind of panic attack. And it's different for different people, but it's kind of a list of things that you might be able to do. And if you practice, inducing a type of panic, and then knowing that you are sitting there with all of the things you're going to do to attack the panic attack and get yourself through it, you're less likely to have bad panic attacks after that. Some more calming and grounding tips. Place your right hand under your left arm, and then your left hand hugging your right arm, and that gives you a sense of containment. That actually goes back to when we were in the womb, and there's a sense of swaddling almost that gives you a sense of comfort. There's something called butterfly hug where you're almost in the same thing. You just cross your arms and you tap one side to another, one side to another, one side to another, and the sense of going from one pole onto the other on your body has a calming sense. You can put one hand on your forehead and one hand on your chest, and then move the hand that's on your forehead to the belly, and then feel the comforting shift and flow. Those are just kind of some sample things that you can do that also calm and ground you. Some throat and mouth exercises, gargling, singing, chanting, humming, those kinds of things actually cause some calming effort for you as well. There's a whole bunch of things out there in terms of apps that you can get on the phone that are amazing. I only pull the ones up that are free, so that you don't have to. I had to pull off one. I can't remember what it was that wasn't free, and it takes you. You download this app and you just have it for when you need it. And there are some automatic responses that gives you ideas as to what to say or do. Mind Shift is kind of a meditative type of app that you can have. Um, the Wobot is really cute. Wobot is for depression, and it's a pun on robot, except like woe is me, Wobot. And so the robot is a program, but again, it gives you practical advice when you log on to it. It will actually check on you and say, how are you doing today? And it'll like log your moods for you so that you can kind of go back and look at it. Um, on the bottom right, B2R is breathe to relax. That one takes you through a bunch of different breathing exercises, a lot more than what I gave you. Um, Insight Timer in the middle, that's the newest one I put up there. It's a meditative app that's free. I think it has like a little gong goes off and it kind of leads you through some meditative kind of exercises. Um, and of course, if things get to where you're actually would consider to take your life, we want you to have the suicide prevention information as well. Unfortunately, a lot of people in recovery have PTSD. There's an amazing app called PTSD Coach it's just tons of full good information, lots of insights, lots of handouts, resources, and everything that are available on that website as well. So again, while you're not in the midst of a crisis, downloading some of these resources is not a bad idea to have them available to you. Some of the things that I've mentioned in here, I want to make sure I give credit to, some of the wording that I have in here. There's a workbook on just panic attacks, the anxiety and phobia workbook that I just talked about a little bit. The information for that is there as well. And again, I'm hearing from Reed that you'll be able to access this handout with this tons of information. And I know I spoke fast because I usually do this in 3 hours, but I didn't want to take away these slides. So I was like, let me give you the information and you can read them slower than my reading them to you, or have them when when you need them and want to look into more of what I've shared about some of those things. Again, everything doesn't work for everybody. So, you pick and choose the things that will work for you or the thing and share the information with other people as well. But If you get nothing else out of this whole workshop, knowing that you can put something cold across your nose and immediately your breathing and your heart rate will be normal for at least a little period of time is really great information that you can share with others and get through high anxiety periods. So, but thanks to all of you. I'm going to open it up to questions or comments or share anything that's been helpful for them. Awesome. Yeah, yeah, absolutely. Another thing I hadn't thought to mention is weighted blankets. I've got a number of people that really helps with their anxiety, and there's different levels of weighted blankets that you can get. Or also taking a warm blanket and wrapping yourself in it as though you're swaddling yourself, which is comforting for infants, but it's also comforting for us as well. And pets, just petting your pet, being with your pet will reduce blood pressure and stress. So there's lots of other things to do as well. But thanks for bringing it up. Yeah, warm baths, sure. I have they have these thing called talking picture frames that you can purchase. I used to get them from Radio Shack. They were about the size of a compact 2 inches by 2 inches, but the ones that I see mostly are a little bit bigger than that. But you put a picture on one side and on the other side the 10-second message you can record. And what I have people do sometimes is because I work with people with self-injure a lot, I have a shoebox and I fill it full of things that people could look at when they're tempted to harm themselves. But you can use it for anxiety or anything else as well. And the that really makes the biggest impact is to take this one woman, she took a picture of her two little kids and she put it on one side and then she had them sing a song to her for 10 seconds on the other side of it. And so when she is tempted to self-harm, she opens that little picture thing and she presses it and the kids sing to her and she's not going to self-harm, you know. So there's lots of different things you can do that are specific to the person that um, is trying to handle their anxiety or depression or whatever it is. But that distractive technique of, oh, that's right, that this is why I'm trying to do this, and sometimes it's outside yourself that yeah, as well. Yeah, and the butterfly hug is actually an awesome one because we use that uh, in EMDR because I also do EMDR, and it takes you from one side of your body to the other and actually has a very calming effect, and um, you're actually consoling yourself, and making yourself feel calm, and at the same time as you're doing the butterfly hug, do a positive self statement that is safe, like I am in a like if you're in your car, I'm in a car, I'm perfectly safe, the car is stopped, there's nothing going on. No one can hurt me. My doors are locked. I'm, using my butterfly hug. I have my phone available to me and I can call someone in a few minutes and also ground myself. So, um, but yeah, sometimes there are things right at hand that you can use. Okay, thank you all too. Have a good rest of your day. All right, bye-bye.